Now, we begin with the first ever criminal trial of a former president. The jury is deciding former President Trump's fate, and that jury is beginning to take shape. Trump's hush money trial kicked off today, and it's set to pick back up tomorrow. However, we did get a first glimpse at some of the trial's jurors yesterday. 7 were selected, dozens more dismissed. One excused juror said that they couldn't recall any anti-Trump feelings, but then they later admitted to posting, quote, "Trump should be locked up" on social media. And here's what one dismissed juror told Fox News.
Did you say you could be unbiased, though?
I did. It's very difficult for anyone really in this country to not come to this with prior opinions. I think we all have prior opinions about the defendant unless you've been like living in a cardboard box.
And now we are learning more about who actually made the jury. Juror number 1 is the foreman. He's a salesman from Harlem, born in Ireland. He's married with no kids, outdoorsy. And he gets his news from the New York Times, Fox News, and MSNBC. Juror number 2 is a nurse from the Upper East Side with a master's degree. She's not married, has no children, and lives with her fiancé who works in finance. She gets her news from the New York Times, Google, and CNN. She said 2 things that really stuck out. I don't have an opinion of Trump, and no one is above the law. Juror number 3 is a young Asian lawyer from Oregon. He's single, lives in Chelsea, and claims he's not super familiar with Trump's other charges. He gets his news from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Google. Juror number 4 finds Trump fascinating and mysterious. He was born in Puerto Rico, lives on the Lower East Side now, and works in IT. Married with grandkids and has previously served on a jury, but says he doesn't remember what that verdict was. He gets his news from the New York Daily News, the New York Times, and Google. Juror number 5 is a black woman in her 20s who doesn't follow the news and didn't know Trump was facing charges. She lives in Harlem. She's a teacher, not married, and lives with her brother. She gets her news from Google and TikTok. Juror number 6 is a woman in her 20s who works for Disney. She's not married, has no kids, and joked around in the courtroom. She lives with 3 roommates and gets her news from the New York Times, Google, Facebook, and TikTok. She says she doesn't have strong feelings about Trump one way or the other. Juror number 7 is a middle-aged white man. He lives on the Upper East Side. He's a lawyer, originally from North Carolina, married with 2 kids, and his wife works at a bank. He gets his news from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, the Washington Post, and he listens to NPR. Kennedy, a lot to unpack from a original pool, at least in that section of 96, that we now have these few, many dismissed for cause, many dismissed without having to articulate cause, which is proper under the evidence form, the Code of Criminal Conduct here. What do you make of who's on the jury, and what do you make of what happened with those that were excused?
I'm really glad they can go through their social media, because I think there are people who are trying to sneak in below the radar and say things like, I don't really have an opinion. I don't follow politics. I don't know who he is. Meanwhile, they're massive anti-Trump haters, and they just want to get in there to torpedo his candidacy and a potential future presidency. I'm glad they found a way of really vetting those people and getting them out of there. And the people that they're left with sound like they're from very interesting and varied backgrounds. You know, there's a few that I don't trust will be completely impartial, like the giggling lady with 3 roommates. You know, it's like and anyone who's getting their news from TikTok, they can go shopping with my daughters. They can't necessarily sit on a jury because I don't trust them. And I do think that you have to have a certain level of self-awareness and situational awareness about the chaotic times that we're living in, and people who get their news solely from TikTok are suspect.
It's hard. 2 of the jurors said they do get their news from TikTok, including one woman who said that she wasn't aware of any charges against President Trump. And to Kennedy's point, we've reported extensively on the makeup of the news on TikTok, on the statistical representation there of posts, as we've talked about, and how it disproportionately reflects a very certain slant of ideology and also the news.
Ideology and anti-Semitism. And so when you look at where the world is right now and the levers that are being pulled on TikTok to hate Jews and to support, and not just support the cause for Palestinians, because nothing that I've seen is going to feed the mouths of the people in Gaza, but actually support the Hamas savages who perpetrated the October 7th massacre on Israeli citizens. So, I mean, if that's the ideology that's cooking there, what else is there? And why is the president and why are his team members, his campaign team members, so eager to be on TikTok and to try to grab back some of that younger vote? Are they also fomenting some of what's there by their mere presence in politics being on that platform? So I have a lot of questions about that. I talked with the former acting AG under Trump, Matthew Whitaker, last hour, and I did say, is it normal to be asked about how much news you watch? Well, it is in this cocktail that we have of people have to know everything, people have to shame people, people have to cancel people, and people want to look fashionable. Yeah, we do need to know what they're exposed to in terms of where they're getting their news, if those are some of the qualifications for what they read and are exposed to. But I think Kennedy's right. The ability to dig into someone's past in social media is especially important right now to find out who they are willing to let the people who they know follow them and are fans know and what they know about them. It may not be what they put on a questionnaire, but what they're telling Aunt Millie, who follows them on Insta, you might be interested in knowing that.
And Undersecretary, let's dig into that, because the United States just got a lesson in what is perceived conflict of interest and what rises to a legal standard of that, for example, with the Fannie Willis hearing that we saw down in Georgia. A lot of people thought that's clearly a conflict of interest. Well, it didn't rise to the legal standard. I bring this up because one of the jurors was dismissed yesterday after posting on Facebook, good news, Trump lost his court battle on his unlawful travel ban. Now, the judge said, well, if it was just that, he actually would have been fine. I don't consider that bias. That juror prospective juror had gone on to say, however, get him out, lock him up. And my question to you is, it seems on that first sentence, yeah, that's pretty dang biased. And yet the judge here is saying, well, I would have let that person in. So how can we find what is an impartial jury here that doesn't sit well with us, frankly, even though that legal standard might be a little bit tougher to cross?
Yeah, well, I think the first one was really about a policy decision that the court ruled on, and that's why they were for that decision. The second was clearly anti-Trump. I do think if we take a step back, this is a celebration of our Constitution. This is a celebration that every single American has the right to an impartial jury and a right to a fair trial. And so this is great. I mean, the sausage is being made, and we're going through, these jurors, but, it's 7 Americans that will have the fate of President Trump on his criminal trial. Now, I'm not going to jail for the rest of his life or anything. It's not that, but it's an historic case. Of the 4 cases, these are the first time a former U.S. president is going to a criminal trial. And it's showing not just America, but the world that we believe in the rule of law. And we'll see how it shakes out. We'll see if he's found guilty or not.
It's also showing the power of our politics.
Right. But, and I'd also say to your point, Harris, I would say that's why I have such concern about people getting their news from TikTok, because I have 2 young kids. And they are
what do you
getting
think about the president being on it?
Right. Well, his campaign's on it, not the government. So his campaign's on it. He actually banned TikTok from all federal computers and devices. So, but that's where most kids, including my kids, get a lot of their news, and it's disappointing.
Yeah. Do you want to weigh briefly?
Sure. I think America's reputation is at stake with the selection of this balanced jury, and that is ultimately what we need to understand. Patrick, you're spot on. It's the reputation on the world stage that sends a very strong message of how balanced can we, and is our democratic values really at the center of this election and the final decision that we will see. So it's bigger than the New York case, for sure.